Hello and welcome to this training on specific learning disabilities determination. My name is Adam Christ, one of the school psychologists with Bismarck Public Schools. The purpose of the training today is to provide you with updated information regarding eligibility under specific learning disabilities. The documents referenced throughout this training are located on Moodle. While this graphic is what most educators wish special education evaluations for a learning disability truly depicted, the reality is that this graphic is much more representative of learning disabilities, as one size does not fit all. The overview of the training today will be to review the special education guidelines of specific learning disabilities, in addition to 2 worksheets that evaluation teams can utilize when determining eligibility. Additionally, other pertinent information regarding learning disabilities will be discussed. This slide lists the federal definition of specific learning disabilities. Please reference the guidelines documents included on Moodle. The top of the guidelines includes this federal definition of specific learning disabilities. After the federal definition, the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction, or DPI, eligibility definition is included, which is a child with a specific learning disability, SLD, means that a child has been evaluated in accordance with the department's policies and procedures, determined to have an identified learning disability, needs special education, i.e. specially designed instruction, and may require related services. Specific criteria is then included with the information given using the response to intervention or RTI process and the severe discrepancy method. Bismarck Public Schools, or BPS, structured the specific learning disabilities guidelines document to be consistent with all other guidelines documents for eligibility areas. Before we delve into the specifics of eligibility, we are going to review specially designed instruction, or SDI, as educational need is a large component of eligibility for specific learning disabilities. Located on Moodle is a document entitled, "What is Special About Special Education?" The document was developed to clarify the relationship between specially designed instruction, core instruction, and interventions within a multi-tiered system of support. The document includes information on how specially designed instruction is applicable across all tiers of an RTI system. The document also contains information on SDI's defining characteristics, relationship to core instruction, goals, individuals, and delivery methods. The intent of SDI is for students with disabilities to be provided with services that allow them to achieve equal to their same age peers without disabilities. Simply put, SDI is what's special about special education. SDI is much more than helping a student complete assignments. Also located on Moodle is a document titled "What SDI is and what SDI is not." This is a short document intended to provide brief overview on the difference between the reality of what specially designed instruction is and what some individuals may assume is meant by SDI. Because we need to make these decisions on an individual student basis, being fair does not always mean providing the same thing for every student. It means providing every student with what he or she needs to be successful. It is not based on what is convenient for the teacher or the system. It is truly about being fair and about meeting individual student needs. This quote from Anita Archer is something we've known for a long time, and the research continues to support it. Research conducted by the Editorial Projects in Education Research Center in 2011 has shown that the strongest in-school influence on student learning is teaching. So how well you teach, equals how well they learn. Co-teaching is a service delivery vehicle for SDI. It's a way of doing business. A way of providing the specialized instruction to individual students, yet also providing them with access to the general education curriculum. Co-teaching can be thought of as a formal equivalent of collaboration, not just talking about services to kids, but jointly delivering the services. There is much confusion around the terms instruction, accommodation, and modification. Often, people confuse or interchange the words. To clarify the differences, located on Moodle is a document titled Instruction, Accommodations, and Modifications Defined. When you look at the handout, you'll notice that we have not used the term intervention, but we have chosen to use the word instruction, because in responsive systems where multi-tiered systems of support are in place, universal core instruction occurs in the general education classroom for all students. Interventions are delivered by the gen ed teacher to assist students who need additional support. Accommodations are delivered to students who are identified, have academic or behavioral need, and have a plan covered under IDEA, Section 504, or an IEP. In a nutshell, an accommodation is differentiated changes made in either materials, environment, or means of student expression that does not change the outcome of the task, does not fundamentally alter the curriculum or lower expectations or standards of instructional content. Modifications are differentiated changes made to instructional content, standards, expectations, so that a child can participate, actions that change the outcome of the task, and do fundamentally alter the curriculum or lower expectations or standards. Instruction is strategies used to teach the universal core content. These strategies may or may not be differentiated to meet the needs of individuals within the group. This graphic is commonly used to depict the 4 criteria needed for eligibility of specific learning disabilities. It is used throughout the presentation as orientation to where we are in the process. There are 4 criteria to consider when identifying a student as eligible for special education under the category of SLD. 2 are inclusionary and 2 are exclusionary. 3 of the 4 criteria are the same regardless of which identification model used. 1 of the 4 criteria requires a choice: use of the discrepancy model or response to intervention model. Throughout the presentation, when we begin a new section, the criterion we are discussing will be highlighted in yellow. Regardless of the method used to identify a learning disability, lack of academic achievement needs to be present. A student can be found to have a learning disability in one or more of the following areas: oral expression, listening comprehension, written expression, basic reading skill, reading fluency skill, reading comprehension, mathematics calculation, and mathematics problem solving. We will now move on to the second criterion. This is a criterion in which evaluation teams will need to make a choice. This second inclusionary criteria is that the student does not make sufficient progress academically. This is where evaluation teams have a choice to use the first option, which is what we call RTI, or to use the second option of a pattern of strengths and weaknesses, which is the discrepancy model. We will now move on to the third criterion. The first exclusionary criterion is to ensure that a student's poor academic progress is not due to another disability or academic hardship. Information gathering during the student profile process will help the evaluation team determine if any of these factors appear to be of concern for a student's lack of academic growth. If teams have questions in any of these areas will need to be addressed on the assessment plan, with the results taken into consideration and ruled out in order to consider eligibility for specific learning disabilities. We will now move into the last of the criteria. The final exclusionary criterion is to rule out a lack of appropriate instruction. Evaluation teams may look at the RTI data to help determine this. This could include beginning of the year data, middle of the year, the end of the year data, standards-based progress report assessments, state assessments, etc. It is important to document this information when considering eligibility. Next, we will be moving into the worksheets for specific learning disabilities created by BPS. Access to both documents are provided on Moodle. The worksheets will be utilized if a student is found eligible for special education in the category of specific learning disabilities. The worksheets may be completed and inserted into the Integrated Written Assessment Report, or IWAR, in the Summary and Recommendations section. Insertion into the IWAR is not mandatory, as DPI has a similar worksheet already embedded within the IWAR when a student is found eligible for specific learning disabilities. We will begin with the RTI worksheet first. When using the RTI model, the evaluation team must determine that the child does not make sufficient progress to meeting age or state-approved grade level standards when provided with scientific research-based intervention. The team must then determine a student's rate of progress. Is the student's rate of progress, when given interventions, significantly lower than expected? Or does a student maintain expected progress only when provided with resources beyond the general education system? If the answer is yes, the evaluation teams must list the area or areas and provide the student's rate of progress data. The evaluation team must then look at a student's academic achievement. Is the student's academic achievement level significantly below that of expectations and/or peers? If the answer is yes, the evaluation team must list the areas and provide the discrepancy data. Does the student have an educational need? If the answer is yes, the team must list the area and provide resources used to determine that need. Finally, does the student require specially designed instruction? If the answer is yes, the team must mark it. Additionally, if formal means are used to measure achievement, do the informal results, or curriculum-based measures and standards-based progress reports, confirm the formal results? Informal results should support formal results. If data is contradicting, additional information should be gathered, and when the team has all information needed, professional judgment should be used to make a determination regarding the existence of a discrepancy. North Dakota DPI has identified that scores that fall at or below the 10th percentile when using norms are typically considered significantly discrepant. When comparing scores using standard deviations, typically you will see 2 times discrepant or greater as considered significantly discrepant, and anything less than 1.5 times discrepant is not considered significantly discrepant. It is that range from 1.5 through 1.9 that will require professional judgment. Times discrepant is not the ideal measure, but it gives more indication as to the magnitude of the discrepancy. So how does one calculate times discrepant? You would divide the small number into the larger number, to calculate the times discrepant. Here are some examples. If the student was reading 30 words correct per minute, but the expected performance was 110 words, you would divide 110 by 30 and get 3.67. Therefore, the student's performance is 3.67 times discrepant. Another example is a student getting out of his or her seat without permission 7 times per period, but the expected performance was 2 times. You would divide 7 by 2 and get 3.5. Therefore, the student's performance is 3.5 times discrepant. There is one exception to this procedure. In those cases where either the student performance or expected performance is 0, you cannot divide the larger number by 0. The times discrepant would simply be the higher number. An example is a student hitting another student 8 times a day, but the expected performance was 0 times. Therefore, the student's performance would be 8 times discrepant. On this slide is a form that evaluation teams can utilize when determining how significant a student's performance is when compared to expected performance. A blank copy of this form is located on Moodle. This form can be used for either the RTI process or the discrepancy process when determining eligibility. One area of note is for evaluation teams utilizing AIMSweb. AIMSweb norms have the average performance between the 25th and 75th percentile. However, remember at BPS, Bismarck Public Schools utilizes the 40th percentile as being average. Next, we will move on to the worksheet for the severe discrepancy model. On this, using the severe discrepancy process, a student needs to exhibit a pattern of strengths and weaknesses in performance, achievement, or both. The difference from this to the RTI process is the pattern of strengths and weaknesses versus the RTI model, where students had to make lack of sufficient progress. Next, the team needs to determine if a significant gap between the student's performance on individual measures of intellectual or cognitive ability and standard measures of achievement exist. If yes, the evaluation teams need to include the data from the ability and achievement assessments. Next, the evaluation team needs to determine if a significant gap between the student's performance on the achievement measures in comparison to the average performance of the individual's peers is significant. If yes, the team needs to list the areas and provide the student's performance data. Teams could also include patterns in student profiles when using formal achievement assessments. Again, like the RTI process, evaluation teams need to determine if the student has an educational need beyond that of general education resources. If the answer is yes, the evaluation team needs to list the areas and provide the resources used to determine that need. Again, like the RTI process, evaluation teams need to determine if the student is in need of specially designed instruction. And again, like the RTI process, teams need to have a convergence of data using multiple sources to indicate that the existence of a disability exists. An additional requirement for specific learning disabilities determination is that the student needs to have been observed in his or her regular education setting. This can be completed before the referral for an evaluation, or if not completed, can be part of the assessment plan when conducting the evaluation. One of the requirements of BPS is that the student must have an observation completed by an LD specialist. More observations can be completed by other specialists, but when considering specific learning disabilities, a learning disabilities teacher needs to have observed the student. BPS has many tools available for use in determining a child's strengths and challenges. Use all tools accurately and with fidelity. Remember, deviation from their intent or administration practices undermines the assessment results and then the programming recommendations. Know not only the global area for which the instrument is intended to assess, but know the individual subtest skills measured. Be ready to explain to a parent what it means when they ask what reading fluency is, what atypicality means, and what the similarity subtest measures, what decibel and frequency levels are, etc. You should be able to explain each area generally without showing the protocol or sharing a direct item from the protocol. Remember, practitioners who use these instruments are obligated to keep the proprietary information confidential. You are not to share any of the specific questions with parents, etc. Assessment tools are extremely expensive to develop and norm, and all have proprietary rules. Divulging this information corrupts the credibility and reliability of the instrument. Also, remember that if you present your protocol publicly, then it may be subpoenaed if a court case results. Next, we will move into information relevant to specific learning disabilities, but not included within eligibility criteria. In a multi-tiered system of support, the problem-solving process is utilized for students who are not making expected progress in the general education setting. The problem-solving process includes 5 steps: problem identification, problem analysis, plan development, plan implementation, and plan evaluation. The problem-solving process should be occurring before a special education evaluation for specific learning disability begins. Even if the problem-solving process is utilized for a student before an evaluation team is still able to use either method for determining SLD, the RTI method or the severe discrepancy method. The assessment of the student's progress in database systems is, of course, the heart of the problem-solving process. During the comprehensive evaluation, the evaluation team analyzes all the progress monitoring data, including the trajectory of the student's progress, called the rate of improvement, as compared to that of typical students. The calculation of rate of improvement, or ROI, along with graphing the data, are critical features of making a reliable and valid determination as to whether the student's ROI is comparable to or significantly discrepant from that of typical students. Given the importance of progress monitoring data in the eligibility determination process, problem-solving teams should attend to the issues that ensure the student's data is accurate and reliable. Those issues are the training of those administering the progress monitoring assessment, fidelity of administration of the assessment, and management of the data. High-stakes decisions require the use of valid and powerful assessment data. We can tell if the student is making progress by determining the student's rate of improvement, or ROI. We are literally measuring whether they are responding to the instruction. We use progress monitoring to measure this change over time. Is the student responding enough? The ROI will tell us if the instruction is successful or if we need to make a change in instruction. Rate of improvement indicates if changes are needed in the core instruction and/or the supplemental instruction to help the student. We need to consider, is there go-upness? Is there enough go-upness? Rarely would we want a student's ROI to be flat or go downward. So why rate of improvement? Progress monitoring is about identifying whether a student responds or does not respond to instruction and intervention. We need to accelerate the students who are falling behind. We want to use a systematic and scientific process to set goals rather than just use educated guesses. An ROI allows for an objective measure to determine if students' goals are appropriate or should be changed. Students who are behind in their achievement levels must improve at a faster rate than a typical student in order to catch up. The faster rate is the targeted or aim-line growth for a student, a rate that will allow them to achieve benchmark over time. The rate of improvement actually achieved by the student is determined by the data collected during progress monitoring. This is reflected by the attained growth or trend line. Let's look at this student's goal. If the student makes progress along this goal, will he or she close the gap? In this example, the trend line, the dashed red line, is the projected attained trend growth. It shows the progress the student is currently making. The black line, the targeted growth or aim line, shows the growth needed in order to close the gap by the end of the year. Based on this graph, we can assume that the student will likely close the gap. Finally, specific learning disabilities is never a related service. Related services means services such as physical and occupational therapy, speech-language services, mobility services, transportation, school health services, school social work services, etc. Thank you for listening to the contents of this presentation. Your time is appreciated, and we hope this training provided you with information needed to feel more comfortable in understanding special education eligibility regarding specific learning disabilities. If you have any questions, please contact your special education coordinator.